Return to Outcome 1, Program 1.1, and we will go to Senator Bligh for her first line of estimates questioning.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for appearing today. Can the department confirm whether Australia is still on track to submit its 2025 emissions target? 2035. Doing that on time.
So good to see you, Senator. So as the Minister and the government have stated, what's actually required is advice from the Climate Change Authority, so under the Climate Change Act. And so the chair of the Climate Authority made it clear in December that they were going to be undertaking further analysis. So the government has to await receipt of that advice before it's in a position to consider it and then put forward Australia's updated 2035 target.
Okay, and we're not going to go in line with other countries that have managed to get theirs in. So, you know, how long is the delay going to be?
Yeah, so there's a range of what other countries have done. So I think as at thank you. So as at the 19th of February, it's 15 of 195 Paris Agreement parties have actually communicated their NDCs that include an updated 2035 target. So what we are actually expecting is that countries over 2025 will be put forward their NDCs. And probably a useful clarification from the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, Mr Simon Steele, was that he was really calling for all countries to submit by September, because this will allow the UNFCCC to do a synthesis report prior to the big COP in Brazil that will be happening in November.
Okay, so we can assume that Australia will meet that deadline of September 2025
That's
this
right.
year?
Yep.
And just having a look, did the department recommend or approve the website change that removed the February 2025 deadline? Like that date, where because it was due in February 2025, that was changed in December, I believe, on the website.
I think we'll just need to take that on notice. But just referring to my earlier comment, Senator, it was a nominal date of February. As I said, it's a much smaller proportion of countries, so 15 of the 195. So Australia is in good stead with other countries this year in terms of the timing for its NDC.
That's all. That's no further questions from me.
Excellent. Senator Darwin.
Thank you. My questions are in relation to the Frontier Nuclear Energy Modelling Report, so whoever is familiar with that.
I think those questions will be best answered in Program 1.2 when we're dealing with energy.
Okay.
The team are waiting, so once we're done with climate change, we'll be on to that one.
Cool. Senator Cadell.
Thank you, Chair. What's the current number on emissions reduction since 2005 baseline?
Thank you, Senator. I'll just get my latest facts and figures. So the latest estimate of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions is 28% below 2005 levels, and that's from our June 2024 quarterly update, which was published last November.
When's the next one due about now?
It's due at the end of this month. Yep. We're just finalising it at the moment.
Okay. Some have claimed that emissions are higher for other reasons, for different reasons than they were at the end of the last government, the last quarter there. Is that true? Or
do you want to just elaborate a little?
So how do emissions compare to March quarter of 2022?
So for the year to March 2022, emissions are marginally lower at the moment on our latest estimates.
Yep.
And I think as we discussed at our last estimates hearing, that reflects that there are some quite different trends happening at the sectoral level. And in particular, 2022 was probably the year emissions were most affected by COVID-related restrictions and changes in the economy. And in particular, you can see that in transport emissions, which were at something like a 10-year low. Since those restrictions have been lifted, those emissions have come back to their pre-COVID levels. On the other hand, emissions in electricity, in stationary energy and in industrial processes have all been declining. And so just because COVID was such a confounding factor in trends, like if you go back to pre-COVID, the emissions in the year to December 2019 was the kind of last estimate we have that wasn't affected by those COVID trends, and emissions are now around 10% lower than then.
What we've argued around, I know the difference between 10.1 and 10.2 gets clouded in this space of the 42 and the 82, 43 and the 82. The ministers and the government still claiming they're on track to reach 43 by 2030. I think the numbers we had last time is with, I'm trying to get the right phrase you used last time, additional measures I think is the right one. We were at 42.6, I think was the last estimates we had. Have we found 0.4% more in additional measures that we're confident will reach by 2030?
Okay, so I can speak to the 2024 emissions projections. They were also published in November last year. And they found that, so we've got, that includes a baseline scenario with policies that are now being implemented.
Just for the record, what's baseline now?
And a with additional measures scenario, which has some additional measures related to the government's, particularly related to the Future Made in Australia agenda. And under those 2024 projections, we see in the baseline scenario that emissions over the period 2021 to 2030, which is partly how Australia's target is defined, to be 3% below the targeted budget. And so we're overachieving relative to the target on a budget sense. For the point in time, for 2030, the emissions are projected to be 42.6% below 2005 levels in that baseline scenario.
42.6 with baseline now?
That's right, in the baseline. And that's an improvement from last year, the 2023 projections, where emissions were projected to be 37% below 2005 levels in 2030.
So it's a 5% improvement in reductions in 12 months in baseline predictions.
In the baseline, and that reflects the fact that progress was made in implementing some of the government's key policies and measures.
So some of the additional measures had become baseline?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is baseline would have reduced based on that then? Additional measures would have reduced?
So the with additional measures scenario, again, reflecting the fact that the government's policy intentions continue to evolve. We did the with additional measures scenario. This simply included some of the Future Made in Australia measures, as I said, and that one almost identical. So, and it's because the composition of the economy shifts with those measures, but at the headline level, emissions are projected to be 42.7% below 2005 levels, so just a very small difference in 2030, and the same outcome on a budget basis, so 3% better than budget.
Still under 43?
Just shy of the 43% legislated target, that's right.
Okay.
Which is not unusual when we're currently 5 years out from the target year, and it's not unusual to have a gap in that that far out.
Given the assumptions in the budget looks at performance, a lot of industry sources are out there saying that a key component, I know we're not on energy yet, the 82% renewables cannot be achieved, and I am in that basket. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult. What exposure do we have if that is not met? That's a downside risk. Are you contracting that government policies may not deliver the full 82% renewable contact by 2030 in that estimate?
So the emissions projections assume that policies are implemented as planned, and so in full. That's right. So those estimates reflect the full achievement of the government's 82% renewable target by 2030.
Does the department have additional modelling where those aren't met? Do you look at scenarios where we aren't building at the rate of renewables that we thought we would? There are lower things. There's increased difficulties in getting approvals for things, and it is going slower. Do you have models that look at that?
The emissions projections, as I said, focus on implementation of government policy.
I understand that. Do you have
in the emissions projections? No, we don't.
There are no other models than everything works?
Sorry, I couldn't speak to all of the modelling done. I can just speak to the emissions projections.
There are no emissions projections within the department other than everything works?
We construct the emissions projections in accordance with our international obligations, including the guidance issued under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, and that requires the scenarios that we model incorporate the government's policy intentions.
And I get that, but my very specific question, there are no other models of emissions projections within the department other than government policy is carried out in full?
For the work that I can speak to, that's correct. I would note that, however, Senator, you can look at the emissions projections over time, and so we publish these every year, and that shows the cumulative effect of these new policy measures. And so, for example, the 2023 emissions projections did not include the impact of the full capacity investment scheme, which is one of the key measures that's going to help secure 82%. And that achieved a lower level of emissions reductions at that time. Now, lots of things change in the economy and the policy architecture, so it's no longer our best estimate, but that the shift between 2023 and 2024 was in large part due to the implementation of the capacity investment scheme and the implementation of the new vehicle efficiency standards. And details about both of those policies are included in both of those reports if you wanted to get an indication of how important they are.
Slightly cheating on my chair when I said I got one more in this. When you said the emission vehicle standards, I think under the modifications made in legislation, that only was meant to deliver 2/3 or a half of what was originally planned. What, because of the trade-offs at the end, how much was transferred to baseline budget versus what was the additional measure? So
the 2024 emissions projections reflect new vehicle efficiency standards as legislated.
Right, thank you. Last question is that we are now at 42.7, 3% above budget, 42.6 baseline, which is under the 43, suggesting everything works as planned under your model. I don't see that. Given everyone we have here, Snowy Hydro, Curry Peaker, transmission lines, every run runs slow and late, there is no fat, is there? There is no excess comfort, there is no extra insurance policy to get to 43, is there?
I'd say a couple of things, but others might also like to contribute. These are our best estimates based on what we know in last year when we were putting together the projections. All of the assumptions that inform the projections evolve over time. They evolve because of what Australia's doing and the concept that Australia's policy would remain fixed in WACS for the next 5 years is unlikely. It reflects global developments, including global demand for Australia's exports. It reflects what we know about technologies now. Over the next 5 years, I would anticipate that will change as well. And they can go up as well as down, but the projections reflect our best estimates based on what we know now. And as the policy mix changes, as the technology mix changes, as global action changes, we will continue to revise those estimates and publish our best attempt every year.
So I get as policies change, as global things change, we'll reassess. We're all looking at all these international policies. No one's looking at from what I'm understanding, no one's modelling what's actually happening. They're only modelling the policies. Is that correct?
I would say that we are modelling, so each year we update in light of what is stated with respect to the timing of projects, and so as project timing shifts or as project performance or specifications changes, we map that through to the projections.
I remember my first estimates here where we argued about the modelling that created this came from an external source, and it was great fun. I think our first one where the source of the modelling from an outsource, I think it was Frontier Economics, the same people. These are the same people that said we're going to get $275 cheaper energy bills they're the same that did these projections on emissions and 82% renewables. Given one hasn't been met, what confidence have we got that the other side of that's going to be met?
Well, Senator, I think it's fair to say that the government has legislated its commitment to 43% reductions by 2030. It continues to track its progress towards that target, including through statements to Parliament each year by the Climate Change Minister. And it will continue to revise its policies and measures in light of how it's tracking to that target.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Waters.
Questions will be for you again, Ms Rowley, covering some of the issues that we spoke about before. So in 2023, Queensland's Caval Ridge open cut coal mine reported emissions of 314,000 tonnes to the Clean Energy Regulator, but satellite monitoring by the Al Gore-backed emissions monitoring project Climate Trace records emissions from that mine to be 1.8 million tonnes, more than 5 times what the mine is reporting to government. What action are you taking to reconcile that discrepancy?
So, thank you, Senator. As I referred to earlier in my comments, sorry, I'm just going to get my notes so that I have the details here. We take great care and in compiling the inventory, the rules for facility level emissions reporting, and we continue to improve them as technologies improve. We're aware of studies by a range of organisations that seek to estimate emissions from fossil fuel projects. I'm not familiar with the specific study you referred to, but I'm familiar with similar ones. And we've been engaging with those groups and other experts. This is from IEA, from international studies, and from domestic experts like those at the Superpower Institute, to really understand what they're doing and how they get those estimates. They typically employ top-down or satellite-based estimation methods, coupled with some different sampling and modelling approaches applied under a range of conditions. They're often also time-specific, so they might just involve a few data points over time, or in some cases even single ones that then get extrapolated to estimate for example, annual emissions. Study authors, as I said earlier, typically acknowledge that there's very high uncertainty associated with these methods. And they're not the methods that are prescribed and required to be used by countries, including Australia, under the UNFCCC and under the IPCC guidelines. So these methods are not ones that we use in our national inventory, and so the numbers aren't directly comparable. However, we've taken a strong interest in satellite-based estimates for things like fugitive emissions. We use satellites as one of the inputs to compiling our land inventory and have for many, many years. And we've commissioned research to understand what that technology can do better. And we have also, given the level of interest and the kind of the very divergent estimates that come from these technologies, in its response to the CCA review that I referred to earlier, the government has established an expert panel. It's led by Australia's former Chief Scientist, Dr. Cathy Foley, and that committee is has been tasked to take a close look at these new technologies and to advise the government on the potential role that those measurement approaches could play, both in our National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme, which is the facility level estimates, and the National Greenhouse Accounts more broadly.
Okay, so basically you're just saying their methodology's dodgy and you'll just believe what the companies say?
No, Senator. What I'm saying is that their methodology uses new technologies which are not part of the international rules for national greenhouse gas accounting, We're interested in it. We're keen to learn more about how those technologies can be appropriately used in deriving rigorous estimates, both at the facility level and to inform the national level. And we're very actively involved in both through this expert panel that's been established and commissioning our own research to understand it better so that we can put it to appropriate use. I think that the difference is that when there's a new technology, it doesn't necessarily always give you, rigorous estimates from day one, including because it's got constraints, it's got limitations, and we need to understand it so that we can use it properly.
So is the expert panel now looking at how to incorporate satellite-based methane measurement?
So the expert panel's terms of reference have been published and they're available on our website. In a nutshell, it's to provide advice to the government on the current scientific understanding of atmospheric approaches for estimating fugitive methane emissions, the role that they could play in the NGA, the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme, and our greenhouse accounts, and the improvements in scientific understanding, technology and Australian capability that we'd need for optimal use of these approaches into the future.
Okay, that does sound like very useful information, but you're not stopping approving coal mines while you're gathering that information.
So my understanding is it's not the government's policy to that new projects are subject to normal environmental, social and other approvals processes, and new project proposals need to go through those processes.
Yeah, which don't have climate elements to them. Okay. Just on that change of methodology, I found a useful report in the break by an org called EMBA, which is entitled How an Accounting Shift Could Conceal Millions of Tonnes of Coal Mine Emissions. And it talks about that change from method 1 to method 2 that we covered earlier. Although it uses some terminology that I found useful. So essentially it says that company-led emissions estimates, which apparently, and this is what I'll ask you, are the style of estimation that you're now moving towards, that the company-led emissions estimates are miraculously finding that they're less methane intensive. How convenient for those companies that when they do the reporting themselves, they find, hey, there's no problem here, go back to sleep. What verification do you do of that company-led estimate of methane?
So companies that have obligations to report their greenhouse gas emissions at the facility level under the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme are subject to the requirements of that law, the associated rules, and it's overseen by the Clean Energy Regulator, an independent statutory authority that administers that scheme. They might be better placed to speak to the details of the verification arrangements, both firm-led but also the checks that the regulator itself conducts with respect to the kind of accuracy and veracity of those reports.
Is there any legal prohibition on false or misleading information in the provision of that methane estimate?
There are definitely penalties for non-compliance with obligations under the law and the statutory rules. The Clean Energy Regulator could probably speak more specifically to those.
But is there a prohibition on false or misleading information? There's not in the EPBC Act, but I'm just asking about this other legislative regime that the CER is overseeing.
I'd need to take the details on notice.
Okay.
I'm very happy to provide further information on that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so just this report says the Australian government's proposed shift towards unverified company-led emissions estimates could render millions of tonnes of methane invisible, while satellite measurements continue to raise serious under-reporting concerns. I'm going to get your reaction to that. And the other statement was expanding the existing under-regulated approach to self-led reporting without holistic improvements to Australia's sovereign methane measurement and verification capacity will only further undermine the integrity of our emissions inventory and also increase sectoral unfairness across the safeguard mechanism. What do you say to those contentions?
I think the main thing I'd note is that we're doing quite a lot of work and this continues many years' practice of continuous improvement, both in the national inventory and in the NGA scheme, the facility level reporting. And just a few examples. So, and this picks up the discussion we were having earlier. So, last year the government amended the NGA scheme to introduce phase out the use of method 1, which is the most kind of generic method for estimating fugitive emissions from coal extraction for open cut mines covered by the safeguard mechanism.
Yes.
We introduced an additional method 2, which is a higher tier.
the company-led self-reporting one,
to incentivise uptake of more accurate methods for estimating fugitive methane emissions from flaring of gas in natural gas production. And we updated method 2 for estimating fugitive methane emissions from produced formation water occurring in an oil or gas operations to better reflect on-site operations and incentivise on-site abatement. We also require the Clean Energy Regulator to publish the methods that are used by safeguard mechanism facilities to estimate their emissions, so that there is that additional transparency with respect to what sits behind the emissions estimates that companies provide. Facilities are required, you're correct, to say, to report on their emissions in the same way that I guess I'm required to report on my tax arrangements to the tax office.
But the tax office can verify with you, and I'm interested in the verification that happens.
Reports are governed by law. They are administered by an independent regulator, and there are penalties for non-compliance.
Okay, but you're not sure what verification process the CER uses, and I have to now ask them whether they check what the companies say is accurate, or whether they're just taking the company's word for it. The department doesn't have any oversight of that.
The Clean Energy Regulator is responsible for the administration of the law and can speak at their best place to speak to their compliance and enforcement practices. As I said, I'm very happy to take on notice and provide additional information with respect to the requirements of the law, but I just don't have those details here with me.
And has the department ever, last question, Chair, has the department ever actually asked the CER to tell you, the department, what verification they use about these claims that coal companies make?
I've had briefings over the course of the last 3 years as the executive responsible for the NGA scheme, including from our Clean Energy Regulator colleagues, including where they've talked about their compliance practices. But as I say, I don't have that detail, and they are much better placed to speak to their practices than I am.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Senator Cadell.
Very quickly, I hope it's you. The IFSLM, you guys do that?
Yes.
Land management. So what's the current update? Where are we at on land management systems? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I might get started, and my colleague might want to add some specifics. But IFLM, for those who don't speak, acronym is the Integrated Farm and Land Management Method, which is being developed under the Australian Carbon Credit Unit scheme. Sorry, I'm just going to get it. That's department-led. Okay, so this has been under development in consultation with stakeholders, including industry, experts, academics and others for some time now. And we've had many rounds of workshops with particularly an industry working group, but with broader stakeholders as well, to inform the development of that method. It will cover activities including native plantings, revegetation and soil carbon on farmland, and it's the first method that is going to stack those multiple activities onto a single parcel of land, what we call a framework method, that you can have different activities in a single ACCU project. And we are planning to have a plain English version of that method released by the end of Q1, so by the end of March. And we aim to release an exposure draft of that method by mid-year. Okay.
Some of the landholders specifically are concerned, in consultation with my office, that the 3 areas they thought were all sequestration. It was biomass sequestration, soil carbon sequestration, and measurement approach. There's no review and the scope doesn't look at mitigation, where they're actually doing. Is there any opportunity to increase scope at the moment?
So the scope of the method is, as I said, abatement from regeneration and plantings and improvements to soil carbon. And we are planning to finalise this first version of the method with that scope. As I said, it is a framework method, and following one of the recommendations of the independent review of the ACCU scheme led by Professor Ian Chubb, there's a concept of what we call modules that could be added to methods over time, and there would be, potential through proposals led by proponents or industry or academics or others to add additional activities to that method over time.
Over time, but not in this. So specifically, if I was looking, I'll make something up. I might grab something. If I was talking about intensive grazing, where there's manure collection and using it for fuel or other use, where there is mitigation, that's not in this specifically. We can't look at that here.
There's no intention to include that in the first version of the integrated farm and land management method. As I noted, it's been under development for some time, and there is strong interest from the industry in getting a method landed so that these activities can projects doing these activities can get underway. We do have other methods that deal with things like waste management, including manure management, and so projects can still happen for those activities. But as I said, it's a framework method, and there is the potential to add additional modules over time.
Okay. Specifically, this will be a question I need, even though we won't be getting it back for this Parliament, I don't think, to take on notice. Can I get a list of organisations and experts that have been consulted on the grazing suppression part of the ILM in the rangelands ecosystems?
Sorry.
There's been a lot of experts spoken to. Miss Lee Perry.
Thank you. I'm Kate Lee Perry, branch head of the carbon crediting branch. Thank you for your question. Yes, we have been engaging with a range of experts and stakeholders through the development of the integrated farm and land management method. And that includes experts from the academic community, some of the industry participants that engage in the scheme and are interested in using the method once it's available, and that does include also stakeholders in the livestock sector as well. So yes, we could take on notice a list of those stakeholders that have been engaged through the process to date.
And a date, if you can just apply that when they were.
Yep.
Thank you very much. That's all I have, Chair.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.